What is going on, everybody? We are back with another review. In this one, we are talking about Season 1, Episode 24 of The Twilight Zone, and this was called Long Live Walter Jameson. Per the norm, please check the link in the description below if you're over on YouTube. That will take you over to the Patreon, where you can get everything a full week sooner. All right. This has absolutely been one of my favorite episodes so far. I don't know where all this is by far Charles Belmont's best story. So, just to give you an idea, season 1, episode 24, Long Live Walter Jameson is the name of the episode. This was directed by Anton Leader, written by Charles Belmont, and was released March 18th, 1960. So, just to give you an idea, Charles Belmont wrote Elegy, which Elegy was a decent one. Not great, not bad, but was decent. That was the one, if you guys remember, where the guys ended up on an asteroid where people go to die and become one with the scenery for all eternity. Charles Belmont wrote Perchance to Dream, which was one I really didn't like all that much. That was the only other one that he wrote. The good news is he's getting better and better with each thing that he writes, story-wise. So, and we have one more from him this season. Let's hope it's the best one. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this, guys. I don't know what else to say. We will start with the rundown of the episode. So, this guy is teaching class, and another teacher is sitting in on the class, and he's a history teacher, and he's talking about the Civil War, where he talks about a specific. He goes into detail about the life of a Civil War military person, where the military person basically isn't very well known. The soldier isn't very well known. So, at the end of class, the other teacher asks him, he's like, hey, how do you know so much about this guy? And he's like, it's all in this book. And he's like, well, do you mind if I borrow the book? And he's like, sorry, I don't loan books out to people that forget about them. Kind of that are very forgetful. And he's ribbing him a little bit. At which point the guy's like, yeah, I understand. He's like, a lot of students say that you know so much about what you're teaching, it's almost like you've lived it. This comes back into play. So then he goes on to the old man goes on. The old teacher goes on to invite the instructor over for dinner. He's like, I'd like to invite you to dinner. And he's like, is it me? Or he lists a female's name, and the guy's like, no, it's me that wants to invite you. And he's like, okay. So later that night, he's seen walking over to her house because they live like right across the street from each other. And as he leaves to head that way, some old lady is standing in the front yard and is like kind of reaching out to him as he walks past. He doesn't see her because she's hiding, and he walks off. He goes he gets across the street, knocks on the door. The young lady answers the door, and she greets him, and it is his fiance. At which point, you also find out that the old man that is also a teacher is her dad. So they're sitting there, and they have dinner, and there's a lot of joking going around everybody after dinner. The father tells his daughter to go study because she's in college to get a PhD, and he basically, at this point, tells the younger man that, you can't marry my daughter, and basically reveals that he knows he's older than what he pretends to be, at the very least. And the way he finds out is, or found out was, he had come home shortly after one of the recent lectures, to look up this person because he has some old Civil War photos, and finds a Civil War photo that has the name of the soldier that was being spoken about, and it looks just like the guy that works, that the young gentleman and the younger gentleman. Um, and he's like, "Is that you?" And he's like, "Yes, it is me." And the guy was like, "So how old are you really?" He's like, "Would you believe that I knew him?" And he points to a statue of Plato. And he's like, "That's over 200 years old or some shit like that." I don't remember how long in 2000. However long ago Plato was around. Might be 2,000 years. And he's like, "There's no way." Um, so he discusses and basically states the way that it happened was he had a thought where life isn't really worth living if you can't live forever. Um, and he runs into an alchemist, and he tells the alchemist his thoughts and opinions, and the alchemist basically says, "Yeah, I can have you live forever. I can help you live forever." And he's like, "Okay, how are you going to do that?" And he's like, "Well," he runs some tests on him, and then eventually he got married and watched his wife grow old and his kids get older, and then everybody die, and he just never aged. He never died. He just kept moving on and going on and going on. He eventually gets to a point where he's at where he's at now, engaged to this new woman, and the old man and the old dad is like, well, I, how can I have that happen? I want to live forever. And he's like, "No, you don't. I don't even want to live forever. I'm to the point now where I want to die. Every time I sit at my desk at home, I open a desk drawer and there's a revolver in there, and I think about taking myself out, and I'm too much of a coward to do it." And the old man was like, "Yeah, but I'm afraid to die. I don't want to die." And he was like, "Yeah, well, what makes life worth living is the fact that it ends." Um, and he's not wrong, but we'll get into all that here in a short bit. And so they go on, and eventually he tells the lady that the young gentleman tells his fiance that they're going to get married that night, and the dad's not going to be able to do anything about it. The dad's like, "I'll tell her," and he's like, "No, you won't. She won't believe you. You won't even believe it in the morning." So they go on. He leaves to go back over to his house, and it appears he's about to write a note of some kind at his desk. He opens up the desk drawer. He pulls out the gun again. He cocks it, and then he puts the gun down. And he pulls out a pad of paper like he's about to write something. And somebody's like, "Hey," and she gives a name that he hasn't been called at all. And he's like, "Who's that?" And he turns the light on and flashes it on her, and it's the old lady that was hiding behind the tree, and she reveals herself as his most recent wife. And she's like, "I didn't believe it. I looked in the newspaper and I recognized you, and I didn't believe it, but I had to come and see it and make sure that it's true. I know who you are. What I don't understand is how I'm now old and you're not. But the one thing I can't let you do is do this to another person, to another woman." And it's almost made a point that what he basically does is he usually gets married, is with them for 10 to 15 years, and then divorces them or leaves them to go start a new life or whatever it is that he does. So she pulls up the gun, she shoots him, and she leaves. And upon leaving, another guy rushes in, or the dad from across the street runs across the street because he heard the gunshot, and runs in and sees him sitting at his desk, and he's just kind of sitting on his desk facing towards his back to the doorway. And he runs in, he's like, "Are you okay? What happened?" And he realizes he's been shot, and he's like, "Oh, I gotta call you an ambulance." And he reaches out and puts his hand on the phone, and he's like, "No, don't. It's time." And as he's sitting there, all of a sudden he starts aging. and I don't know how they did it, but it's almost like you saw the wrinkles show up. Um, and I say that because, again, in most older stuff like this isn't that fluid. Like, it's almost like he didn't move. Like, there wasn't like a transition where it did that weird phase thing, and you could tell he's not in the exact same spot. It like looks like the actual wrinkles just show up on his face. It was done really well. And he's just starting to age super rapidly, turns into this really old man, and then collapses on the floor and dies. And at this point, his fiance was running back across the street. Dad hurries up and turns off the light and closes the door. And she's like, I gotta see him. And he's like, he's gone. He's not in there. I don't know what's going on. And she busts in through the door. And at this point, she even mentions it's just his clothes. And his clothes are laying on the floor. And where the rest of his body used to be is now just dust. And she's like, what is that? He's like, it's just dust. And they leave. And that's the end of the episode. And this episode is also going to end up going up amongst my faves. Not just because it was good, it was well written. And it was. It was. As I said earlier, it's Charles Belmont's best story so far. And it's weird to think that I have probably 2 of the top 5 episodes so far back to back. That doesn't happen often. But one of the things that I love about this episode is it kind of touches on this idea that life is short and it's meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be happy. Guy mentions you love a rose because it doesn't last long, among other little neat catchphrases along those lines. And again, it specifically mentions like life is great because it's short. Not it adds more meaning to what you do now. And there's so much that comes along with that. Like, if you're not happy, you need to do whatever it is that you can do to change it, to be happy. It doesn't specifically say that. That's just more my inner thoughts working. Because life is short, guys. It's and again, I've had this conversation with some music reactions I've done before, both with and without Kat. For those of you that don't know who Kat is, she's my fiance. But yeah, life is short. Enjoy it. Do what you like. That's what I'm doing here. I'm enjoying this. And who knows how long this will last before I'm done enjoying it and I move on to something different. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thoroughly want to see more stories like this, more stories like A World of Difference. Again, we've had back-to-back bangers, and I'm super excited to see what Twilight Zone throws at us next. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for hanging out for this review, and we'll see you next time. Peace.